in a bigger picture, the company should be the organization that is developing, that is making that product for other people to use, is liable, is accountable for that. But to zoom it down a bit, you have, of course, an end-to-end development team that develops the AI solution. But it's not only the development team that is responsible for it. It's also it's a multidisciplinary team. It's also the data management people. It's also the privacy people. It's also the security people. It's like everybody that is in that multidisciplinary team specifically for that solution, that they're making this consideration, designing the policy around that use case, designing the process and the guardrails and whatnot. That whole team is end-to-end responsible, and the different parts of that responsibility lie with different discipline. And then
It sounds to me that if a company doesn't ensemble the right team, they're already doing something wrong. Like you forget to involve legal, or you forget to involve something.
I think that's the trickiest.
Who's your ideal team of responsible? Who are the Avengers in a company of responsible AI?
I like how you put it. It's indeed a la Avengers bit. Depends a bit on your use case, of course, and the business a company is doing, but definitely business domain knowledge is needed. The actually, use case owner, the one that is behind that idea. The relevant security person, the relevant privacy person, if it contains personal data, of course, if it's we take potentially very high risk situation, right? But also data governance, if it exists. So it actually boils down to, a lot of it boils down to having a proper foundation. Like if you don't even have data management, and you also see it in legislation. Like you cannot, if an AI Act, if you have a high-risk system and you want to be compliant with the AI Act, you need a proper data management. It's one of the requirements, by the way. So it's it's so codependent that it's, I don't think it costs, if you think about it separately, now I have privacy by design, I have now GDPR, now we have AI Act, and now we have data if you look at them as separate initiatives and have the separate streams with separate budget, the chances are they won't communicate with one another. A lot of it can be embedded in, one set of processes, because a lot of it has a lot of overlaps and connections with one another. It's just knowing when to put on the right people. Yeah.
So it's true that for some companies it feels like you're trying to do an Ironman when you're still having trouble finishing a 5K. Or you're trying to shoot a rocket launcher when you still don't know how to use a gun properly, type of situation.
Something like that. Yeah, I think, and the data management, I think, is the big foundation, because everybody wants to do it. It feels to me like, I think, I mentioned this before, like a Jenga metaphor, right? We all want this high tower of AI benefits, but do we want it by taking out things from the bottom and putting them on top? It's not, this basic hygiene of foundation, you need to have that. And then there's also a last step. So you did the implementation and you did the governance and the management. And you also have a step where you look at more let's say, benchmarking and improvement. So it is an iterative process. So you want to have a look back, what went wrong, what went good, how can we make it better next time? So you want to measure somehow there, where are we now? How do we do better with the next iteration? So it involves very much KPIs and, assessments, to where you stand, but also benchmarking with regards to your peers in the industry. So right now it's very early in the shoes. There are very few that are, I think banks are usually at step of AI governance, while most of our organizations are trying to define their principles. But if you're a bit farther than that, I can imagine that there will be a certain standard for financial industry, a certain standard for life sciences and so forth. That will arise as well.
It's interesting because the companies that you were describing as in having their data management and all of the bases very well covered, they generally tend to be companies that are a bit avoidant of taking big risks. So that leads me to think, okay, which are the type of companies that right now are excelling at doing AI and especially doing it responsibly?
I think a lot of it is still tied to regulation. And I think that's also what I see. Most of them enter because of the regulation and because of the compliance. It's more that triggers the urgency to do it right.
No.
And of course you want to inspire people to have it because it's a good foundation, because it's your foundation for trust first of all. But also because I always used to say, regulation is the lowest bar of ethical behavior. Any lower and you're punished by law. So you won't just inspire for them to just do the right thing, because you also carry that responsibility to co-creating where are we going with this, I think that's underestimated a bit, that there are more benefits to doing it responsibly than just compliance, but they're less tangible. So now I'm thinking, how can we make it actually more tangible?
Yeah, fair. I think as a consultant, I'm being super lucky that I've worked in industries that have nothing to lose and maybe were a bit unethical, but also heavily regulated industries. And you really see the differences. Like, being open to innovate at any cost doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing data better.
Yeah, and it also doesn't have to be in a way of your innovation, because I think we're thinking a lot in terms of limitations, but you really think like that gives you a bit of the, let's say, framework within which you can color. And I think that framework makes sense a lot of the time. But you have a lot of freedom to still be innovative. Like if you put, like let's take a car example, for example, because when I think the seat belts came on, everybody's like, yeah, that's gonna, I think that's the argument for innovation. Like anything that's trying to come regulate, like, okay, seat belts are now going a mandatory thing. Oh, that's gonna, be in a way of innovation. It wasn't in a way of innovation. What happened is that safety got a bit the more focus, and safety was in the forefront, and it got improved. And then cars are still innovative. It hasn't changed. So I do believe similar thing can hold here. So it doesn't need to be in a way of innovation. It's just give the safety focus first.